Did Vengeful live up to its predecessor's hype? Is Victoria Schwab overrated? Will Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil live up to everybody else's hype? Let's talk about it. On everybody's most anticipated list this year is this book, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by Victoria Schwab. Victoria Schwab is about to have a big year for her career. This book comes out in June. It's being called Sapphic Interview with a Vampire, or in particular, Toxic Lesbian Vampires. Last year, Vicious by Victoria Schwab was one of my favorite books of last year and is now one of my favorite books of all time. I just recently, in February, finished the sequel, which was Vengeful by v.e.schwab, and I just started this book. I have absolutely no idea why I have a physical copy of this. I'm not joking. I don't know who at Tor even got my address or how. Like, my home address, not my P.O. box. My home. In any other circumstance, I would be worried about this, but getting this in the mail was shocking to me. But I am so grateful. If there's one thing that publishing is gonna do, it's gonna be marketing the heck out of a V.E. Schwab book. If you're an author or you're doing anything where you have to market, you could probably use a website. Even I have one to market myself. I made one with the help of today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website building platform that makes it super easy to have a beautiful, professional looking website of your own for you to talk to your audience, curate a space where your audience can use it as like a hub of all the places to find you, or even sell whatever merchandise you have, whether that be books or t-shirts or art, or even your time. So if you're like an editor or you're a beta reader, Squarespace is a good place for you to set up a website and market your skills. Whatever you want to showcase, Squarespace makes it so easy for you. I'm really happy with my website. It's a hub where people can find all of my different socials, my latest videos, find info about my book club, join my book club Discord. My website is readswithrachel.com. I have general info, frequently asked questions, a contact form. It was so easy to put this together and it looks so good. Squarespace made it very easy to make a website that is just very me. And if you don't know where to start, that's fine, because neither did I. I am not a professional whatsoever in this capacity. Squarespace offers templates for you that you just customize according to your preferences. So whether you're an author, reviewer, an editor, and you want your audience to have a place to commission you or contact you, or you're an author and you want to sell your books, they even have e-commerce tools and a custom merch service that you can utilize without having to worry about things like production and shipping. Whatever your online presence is, whatever your business is, you can use Squarespace to help you organize it, market it, make your sales, do your side hustle with a beautiful website of your own. For a free trial, go to squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, use that QR code on the screen, or go to squarespace.com/readswithrachel for 10% off your first domain or website. That's squarespace.com/readswithrachel. The link is down below, and thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. I don't know if you all know much about ARCs, although somebody decided to play ARC Police the other day, which was hysterical, but there's always a lot of discourse about ARCs. This is as an aside, this wasn't in my notes, but I figured I'd just tell you that typically what happens with ARCs is it tells you what the marketing campaign is on the inside of the ARC. And it does say on the inside of this that the different places that they're gonna send this to are things like reaching out to Schwab super fans, which I have read a lot of. No, that's not true. I have read 3 other V.E. Schwab. Does that make me a super fan? I don't know. Library marketing campaign, cross promotions with Macmillan Audio. The point is, it says ARC and finished book influencer mailings targeting major bookish accounts and fans of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue with a custom curated influencer box. I did not receive a custom curated influencer box. I just received a package with the picture of this on the outside. Actually, when I got it, I was like, I feel like maybe I just forgot I pre-ordered something and they're just like promoting this book, and then I opened the package and this was inside and I'm like, what is happening? The point is, I did love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Now, I absolutely agree that the criticisms of it are valid and warranted. When I read it, I had such a good time, I gave it a 5-star. There's a rather short review of it somewhere on my channel. So I guess the fact that this says on the back, a perfect mix of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and Vicious, and Tor maybe found out that I rated both of those books 5 stars, and that's why this was in my mailbox. I did, in fact, love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and Vicious, so this should be right up my alley. And when I tell you I cracked this sucker open, and it is indeed right up my alley. So this is about 3 women, one living in 1532, one living in London in 1837, and one in Boston in 2019. The first thing that I noticed when I cracked open this book is just how v.e. Schwab's ability to grab you, and how even though this is a 530 page arc, and I think that the physical copy is probably going to be longer, the ability to just not waste a single word. One of my patrons recently sent me this bracelet of this quote that I regularly say, which says, "Words mean things." And this is an author who understands that deeply. V.E. Schwab is so intentional in her writing. She's like writing a whole symphony. She's not writing, I don't even know how to make a comparison here. Okay, so when I was in high school, I used to like to make parody songs. I made terrible parody songs. And one I remember that I made a parody to was I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly. May he rot in jail. Some books read like a parody song. Recently, I was reading this author is getting like absolutely torn apart on the internet for her alignment with Donald Trump. She like laughed about Project 2025 being a thing, and people are just like absolutely roasting her on the internet. So I cracked open her book to see, because people are 1-starring it, and I wanted to see if it deserved 1 star, which is a thing that I do here. And in fact, it does, because the writing, as you can see, is terrible. Like, beamed is not a dialogue tag. And when you look at these 2 books side by side, it's honestly hilarious, because Victoria Schwab knows deeply that words mean things. So reading these like on the same day was a very jarring experience. You get like whiplash reading something like this, where words have no meaning and you're just writing to write, and it's like a parody of a song, versus like this is a whole symphony. This feels like the first time you ever hear the soundtrack to Star Wars. We open, our character 1 is Maria, who is from Santo Domingo de la Calzada, Spain in 1521 is when we open, when Maria is 10 years old. And it explains that she was born restless. That would have been fine if she had been a son, but she was born a daughter, and her family sort of feels like burdened by her, but it never explicitly says that. V.E. Schwab very skillfully in a few pages conveys that to you in a variety of ways. The way that her brothers treat her, the way her mother is frustrated with her over small things, and her oldest brother, Rafa, it says she doesn't have to look down to picture him perfectly, hands on his hips and head thrown back, frowning the way their father did, the way that her oldest brother has for the last year since taking his place, as if that's all their father was, a set of shoulders, a stoic jaw, a hardened voice, a space he can so easily fill. There's so much left unsaid there. It's good. It's just darn good writing. There are small details here given that give the bigger picture of people's lives. And then it talks about how Santo Domingo is a blessed town. People think that people pilgrimage to make pilgrimage. They do a pilgrimage. They go to Santo Domingo because it sits on the Pilgrim's Road, and people come here to lay down their sin. More disappointing still was when Maria discovered that some who walk the Pilgrim's Road are not guilty of a sin at all, that they make the trip not to atone for their past, but to secure their future. And so it talks about how Maria has decided to assign sins to different people, which is quite funny. Again, we're only like 8 pages in, and Maria is already such a complex character, such an interesting character. And she comes, well, there's a woman doing the pilgrimage who is called the widow, and Maria is very drawn to this widow. And the widow says, "Careful, in nature, beauty is a warning." And I'm like, vampire, vampire, vampire. At the end of chapter 1, it says it would be 10 years before Maria sees this widow again. Somebody dies, there's mysterious circumstances. Again, so much is left unsaid, but so much is said, and all of the words are delicious and they mean things. In chapter 2, Maria is 18 or 19. It's 9 or 10 years later, and her oldest brother Rafa has set up her to be married to a viscount. Maria has known all her life that she is not meant for common paths, for humble houses and modest men. If she must walk a woman's road, then it will take her somewhere new. And gay, I hope. Please make it gay. I mean, it is like toxic lesbian vampire, so assumedly it's gonna be gay. And then at the end of chapter 2, it is after Maria has been married off, and it says at the end that she will never see her family again. And then we move on to Alice, who is the character from 2019. That's as far as I've gotten so far. And so far, I can say that it absolutely does appeal to fans of Addie LaRue and Vicious, which I am. V.E. Schwab has a writing style that I feel really grabs you by the throat and doesn't let you go. There's like such an attention to detail here. Rather than just trying to get to the point, it's trying to lead you slowly to where V.E. Schwab wants you to be. And again, like when I look at a book like this versus a book like this, where it's like, I wrote a book, I want to make some sales, versus I wrote a book, I want you to experience something very particular, and also I have worked on my craft so that you can do that in a way that feels like something truly extraordinary. I mean, it's just like, this is why V.E. Schwab is like a person who is writing books that are so highly anticipated. Because like a lot of people could say, I wrote a toxic lesbian vampire book, and we'd say, okay, I'll try it. But when V.E. Schwab says, I wrote a toxic lesbian vampire books, we're like, feed me immediately, I beg you. And you know what? I am being fed. It's delicious. This is probably going to take me a month to finish on the pace that I'm going, but I'm, again, savoring every word. But I did finish another V.E. Schwab book, and we're going to talk about that. I finished Vengeful. Did it, live in the shadow of its predecessor a little bit. But first, let me tell you about some other things that I read recently that I don't really have a place for. I know everybody hates when I do reading wrap-ups and nobody wants to watch them, but figured I'd entice you with the most anticipated book of the year. Okay, so recently I also read The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar, which I have mentioned a few times, but I have not really given like a review for. This was a 5 out of 5. I have never read This Is How You Lose a Time War. I plan to, especially after having finished this. I am in love with Amal El-Mohtar's writing. I want to be wrapped in this book when I'm dead and buried. Just lay me gently within the pages of this. I have finished it, but it has not left me. So in this book, it is a fantasy, sort of. It is a fairy fantasy kind of, but it is not like it's got a fae romance in it, but it's not like a Court of Thorns and Roses type. So there's like different kinds, and I think that this is my specific kind. On the edges of Fairy is a small human town. When you leave Fairy, there is a human town of Thistleford, and there are two sisters who live in this house where they are taking care of these willow trees, one in particular called the Professor. Esther and Isabel are our two main characters. They are sisters, and they cannot be separated even in death. They sing songs together. This is a form of magic. They are a real couple of Von Trapps, and they adore each other, and I adore them. Esther meets a fae being who comes down the river from Fairy, and their name is Rin. They are a fae being with storm magic, sort of. Esther sings, and Rin, in the form of animals, tries to leave like thank yous for Esther's songs, but Esther doesn't know. Esther doesn't know that Rin is trying to flirt, and Rin shows up after having talked to a witch. Rin shows up, and they were like, well, I had to talk to a witch to figure out how to talk to you. Well, they said, why won't you let me requite you, is the quote. And I was like, yearning. So a witch told Rin, hey, you kind of need to like embody a being that can speak if you want to speak to this woman. And Rin's like, got it, I will do that. So they show up in human form, humanish form, and romance ensues. But Esther's got this dude in Thistleford who's interested in her. And when she rejects him, and she rejects him hard, things go, they take a turn. This is magical, but in a very whimsical, yet also dark kind of way, but it's also brilliant. It's also smart. This is fae romance exactly the way I like it. If you like fae romance with pointy-eared big dick dudes, I'm really happy for you. It's just not my preference, especially when they say things like, once we start boinking, I won't be able to stop. I'm tired of that. I want an NB fae of Weather who leaves trinkets because a girl sang a good song. Why won't you let me requite you? They said, oh my God. I can't. The yearning. I can't. But the sisterly love in this is just as much of a shining star, and I teared up at the end. I also really adore the magic here. The magic here is like the double meaning of words is magic. Words themselves are magic. Magic is called grammar in this world. I think that this is brilliant, and it's short but makes a huge impact. It's just so much smarter than I anticipated it being. It's smarter than I am, certainly, and I'm just kind of like perpetually in awe of it. It's just, it's moving and magical and heartwarming and also heartbreaking. And again, it's also short. And I've heard that the audiobook is like a whole performance with sound effects, and like the songs in it are actually sung. So I'm going to reread it on audiobook because I just read the e-arc before it came out and I fell in love. But I anticipate that reading the audio version is going to make me fall in love even further. This is going on my favorite books of the year list. Another thing I read recently was Mother Country by Etaf Rum. So funny story, I picked this up because I wanted to read more from this author because I read Evil Eye last year at the end of the year, and it became one of my favorite books of the year, and it sat in, you know, my good graces so long that I think now it's like one of my favorite books of all time. So I read this and I was so confused because it is the exact same story. Turns out, and I didn't realize this, but this came out before Evil Eye. I thought it was the other way around. This book is from, well, this is a short story, and this is from the Good Intentions Collective from Amazon. I like the Amazon short stories collectives. Two of my favorite things I read last year were from one of their short stories collectives. And this one I wanted to try because this collective is about motherhood in particular, and that's a theme that I really like when we explore, well, if we do it in particular ways. And since Etaf Rum did such a good job exploring that in Evil Eye, I was like, again? Yes, please! Only to find out this is what happened. This is the story that came before Evil Eye. So I'm reading this and I'm like, why did she write this in a shorter format? But it's the opposite way around. So I think that I rated this a 4, but I think that if I had read it beforehand, no, I would still give this a 4. This is about a young Palestinian American woman who is a mother and a wife, and it's about the distance, both emotional and physical, between her and her own mother, and her own journey of motherhood and her own journey of marriage. And again, now this is good. I gave this a 4, but Evil Eye was a 5. I love her writing, but Evil Eye's expansion was so necessary. Like, taking this story and expanding on it was a really smart idea because you just made a good story into a great story, I think. A good way to talk about a theme into a great way that we explored a theme, particularly when we talk about motherhood and how you want so badly to be a good mom, and then you sort of like, you think about the damage that your own mom has done to you and how you want to fix it, and then you end up just redoing what your own mother did. The theme of trauma and trauma as like a generational curse type of thing. And I also thought that the way that Evil Eye in particular explored therapy was so important, not just good, but important. It needs those extra pages. Now, last year, and I don't know if I would feel the same if I had read them the opposite way around. Either way, Evil Eye would have been a 5-star, I think. But Six Deaths of the Saint, which is also from the Amazon short story collections, but a different one, that I found out is also getting a longer version of itself. And I'm really interested to find out if that works for me in the same way, because I gave that a 5, and I want to know, because typically I think Alex E. Harrow really excels in short format. So I'm wondering if maybe Six Deaths of the Saint works better as a short story in a way that Mother Country works better as a longer story. So we'll find out. Another one that I read was Deluge by Charmaine Wilkerson. She also wrote a longer book, but I don't think that this is in any way related to Deluge as far as I can tell. I read the first couple of chapters and it's very good, but I don't think it's related to Deluge in any way. But this is also from the Good Intentions Collective from Amazon. This is about a woman who 1 year after the death of her mother, she's hosting her own 40th birthday party, and she goes up in the attic trying to find like keepsakes from her life as like, you know, party decorations essentially. And she finds these photos of herself when she was a child, and she interrogates her stepfather about this because she's like, these should not exist because everything we owned was destroyed in the flood. Remember? That's what I've been told my whole life. So what happened? And her stepdad comes clean that there is much more to her story and her mother's story than she was told. It was all a lie. It wasn't all a lie. There were a lot of lies. It's a story about having been mothered and parented, and the choices that our parent figures make that can completely change who we are and the trajectory of our life, even if they were good intentioned. There's a quote from this that that really stayed with me was, "You will need time still to accept that you cannot undo the past. You will need time to admit that, try as you might, you cannot unlove your mom. That so often in life there is no either or. That as much as the mind might fight the idea, the heart makes room for opposing truths." And I thought that, and like particularly that last line, "the heart makes room for opposing truths," was just so beautifully done. And the whole story is like that. It's short but poignant, and I certainly teared up at the end. I do think that this is one in particular that, again, if this were expanded, I think that because of Charmaine Wilkerson's writing, I think that it would do well in long format the same way that Evil Eye did. I do recommend it, but this is a 4, and if it had a longer version where we had more time with it, it might be a 5. Another thing that I read was a short story collection, or like a chapbook type thing. It's called The Heartkeeps Faulty Time by Sean Griffiths, and this was requested from my patron Rain. I often struggle with books like this because it can be such a mixed bag. The short stories in here, there is no like real theme to it. Like I've read Hungry Hearts, and the theme is like you're in a city and all these different writers came together to write different, like, and it crosses genres, different stories about food. And this was, again, a mixed bag. There's also Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a super mixed bag. There's one that is like really, like people either absolutely love it or absolutely despise it, about, well, the characters from SVU, Benson and Stabler, and I don't like that at all. And I admit that it's mostly just because I didn't understand it, but it's one of those times where I'm like, I'm annoyed that I didn't understand it, and it's so unenjoyable to feel so dumb. But then there's other ones in here, like particularly the first story is called The Husband Stitch, and I really enjoyed that one. And one of the stories in The Heartkeeps Faulty Time by Sean Griffiths reminded me of The Husband Stitch in a way. The first story in this is about two parents who are clowns and their son who did not really join the family. He didn't fill the family clown shoes. He didn't join the family business. And in fact, he just doesn't have like the joy, the happy-go-lucky kind of things that clowns do. There's a line in here that I highlighted. It says, "Is it easier to kill a man who never laughs? This boy of ours, we wish we could paint a smile on his face, teach him to spread cheer." And it ends with saying, the parents say, "Money is the root of all evil." And the son says, "Yes, but a man needs roots." And come to find out, it was really interesting reading the end of this book, because it says that this story started where that was the prompt, where that line was the prompt. And I think it's interesting to sort of like have this story where the prompt is the end line of the book. Another one that I thought was really interesting was "You Were Raised by a Dragon, What Was It Like?" This again was a prompt, and it turned into a story where it just ends up asking a lot of very interesting questions. Did her scales prickle or slide on your skin? Did her tongue flicker against your cheek like a kiss? Was it hot? Was it cold? Did she coddle you? Did she tell you about the night of the darkness he brings on his stout horse? Did she encourage you to take candy from strangers? What about meth? And that actually made me laugh. Did she light cigarettes with her breath? Did she press those lit cigarettes into your skin, blow smoke in your face? Did she demand your smoke in return? Did she leave a nightlight burning, or did you rely on the yellow gleam from her unclosing eye when the nightmares came? Did she tell you that there was never a princess? Did you take it to heart, or at the end of it all, did only the tip of the lance penetrate? Then there was one short story about this guy who he has this neighbor who is kind of like this snot-nosed kid, and he tends to, like, I think he like took walks and he was taking a break from writing, and then he comes to find out that the neighbors, you know, the snot-nosed kid neighbor is being raised by an aunt who is kind of a prude, but it turns out that she reads the guy's stories. And I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't really sure what the point was. There were a couple of those where I didn't get it. Some of these things kind of go over my head. Again, you know, harkening back to the, I think it's called Especially Heinous in Her Body and Other Parties, that particular story over my head. Now, there was one that appealed to me, but I didn't really like the end of it. It was called Everyone Fails, and it was about it being in training to become a hero. And I almost wished that this book was just that story, but expanded, which is I think you'll notice that that's a theme for me, is if it's a short story, I'm like, does this work just as a short story, or do I just wish that this was expanded? But my favorite out of all of them was Clockwork Girl at the Opera, and this was about a clockwork girl who is a sort of sex worker, and the way that, you know, bodies are used when people sort of dehumanize sex workers, and the dehumanization, but you know, she's not a human, she's a clockwork girl. The dehumanization piece of that, the exploitation of bodies piece of that, reminded me a lot of the Husband Stitch short story from Her Body and Other Parties. So I think that if you liked that piece of Her Body and Other Parties, you might also like that particular story from The Heartkeeps Faulty Time. And that's actually where the line, The Heartkeeps Faulty Time, is from, in particular, Clockwork Girl at the Opera. So out of all of them, that one was my favorite. Again, sort of a mixed bag. I liked a few, but I didn't love any of them. And I would like to see, in particular, Clockwork Girl at the Opera turned into a whole book, or just like a novella on its own. I didn't love any. I liked a few, so I gave it a 3.25. Okay, let's talk about Vengeful by v.e. Schwab. So in the last book, which is about two college friends who decide to do this experiment to find out if they can bring out superhuman abilities out of people by causing near-death experiences, and they learn that they can. One of them, Victor, goes to prison because when he did he accidentally kills his best friend Eli's girlfriend in the process. And Eli, who has the power to heal, he like can regenerate himself, versus how Victor has the power to inflict pain. You think of like Victor makes it seem like he really wants to be more like Eli. He wants to emulate Eli because Eli is just so good at everything and everybody loves Eli. And then you learn more about Eli and you learn that he's not good. But nobody in this is good. Like it very much like has the theme of, you know, everybody can be evil. And I loved that theme. I loved that, you know, that interrogation of, I'm not the villain. And Eli thinks that, you know, he starts tracking down these superheroes while Victor's in prison, and even when he gets out of prison, because he's like, these are abominations. And Eli has, you know, ties to like religious roots. His father was a preacher. I just loved that book. I loved Vicious. So Vengeful came out several years later, and there may or may not be a sequel called Victorious coming eventually. I don't know. Some people, when you bring it up, they're like, no, Victoria says she's not writing it. And then some people are like, no, she's been posting on Instagram stories. I have no idea. What I know is you could end the series here and you'd be fine, but you could have also ended the series on book 1 and also have been fine. A lot of people who loved Vicious were a little bit or very let down by Vengeful. So we're at the second book in the series. We have this cast of characters where we have Eli, who is now in prison. Victor is supposed to be dead, so Eli assumes that Victor is dead. You have, what is his name? Detective Stahl, who was helping Eli to track down EOs, people with extraordinary abilities, but Eli was taking it way too far, and Eli's girlfriend-ish, Serena, who had the power to manipulate people into believing whatever, died at the end of the last book. Victor's powers were affected by Sydney, Serena's younger sister, this little girl, bringing him back to life. She is a necromancer. Sydney feels a lot of guilt for this because in the beginning of this book, we see very quickly that Victor is not doing so hot. Something is very wrong with Victor. It affects his abilities and it causes him intense pain. He's in an extreme amount of pain, and eventually he starts dying for short periods of time. Sydney also finds out that Eli, who tried to kill her, who was friends with her sister, she thought that Eli killed Serena, her sister, who also wanted her dead, because Eli and Serena had come to this idea that EOs were abomination. Eli did not kill her sister, Victor did, and Sydney lives with Victor. So she has this intense amount of guilt where she has harmed Victor. Victor also killed her sister. That's complicated. Sydney is also perpetually going to be a child because of her near-death experience and being brought back to life, and she's perpetually going to be a child. She's never going to age. Much like that little girl from Interview with the Vampire, she's struggling with this. She's also struggling with wanting to... She lives on the run with 2 grown men and an undead dog. She's going through a lot. Sydney was really, I feel like, the star of the show in this book for that first chunk, because what was happening to Victor was interesting, but it wasn't as compelling as Victor's journey in the last book. And also, like, seeing the back and forth between Victor and Eli was a lot of fun in the last book, whereas Eli does not come along until, like, I want to say like 35 maybe % into this book, and I was really missing his pieces of the story. And we also had new additions of Marcella, who is a sort of like mob boss wife whose husband tries to kill her right at the beginning. And you also have June, who is this Irish girl who can shapeshift like Mystique from X-Men. I know a lot of people don't like June, but because Sydney sort of felt like the star of the show in this installment, I think she works because of Sydney. She becomes this sort of stand-in sister for Sydney, but also she gets in touch with Marcella and starts working with Marcella. So I think it made sense to bridge that gap between Marcella's journey and Sydney's journey, and that gap being June, because Victor could not be that gap, because Victor is dying every 5 seconds. So I think that, as usual with V.E. Schwab's writing, this really like makes sense in the way that she's bringing these characters together and intersecting their stories. I just don't know that the themes here were as compelling as the last one. I loved what we were doing in the last one, especially like highlighting Victor and Eli and how they seem so opposite, but they can also be so very the same. What I did love is that we got more of Eli's backstory, and we learned just how manipulative he has always been, and how that was so much a facade, how much was hidden from the reader from the jump, how much was hidden from Victor from the jump, and how Victor was convinced that Eli was this one kind of person who he wanted to emulate, when in reality Eli is sort of monstrous. Is monstrous. Not even sort of. He's kind of a monster. He's a monster. So I think Sydney really needed that stand-in sister of June, one who actually like cared about her safety, but then also she's still missing her sister, and I'm glad we didn't just replace June with Serena. Any other kid in Sydney's position would also want to see if they could fix what they had broken. She feels like, I need to fix Victor, but also if I fix Victor, what if I can also bring Serena back from the dead? And it's sort of left open as to whether or not she did in fact bring Serena back from the dead in the end. And if Serena comes back, that's really bad, because she was sort of like the ultimate big bad. And even Eli couldn't take her out, and Eli can basically kill anybody. But Sydney's powers seem to have brought back Victor in a way that was like wrong. And so now, you know, he's grappling with that. And there's this big showdown at the end where everybody's out to get Marcella, this mob boss wife who can turn everything to ash with her fingers. I didn't really love Marcella's story. She was kind of underwhelming for me. And then I feel like when she died, that this was just sort of like kind of all for nothing. I appreciate that June got out of it, so that, you know, in the future we will see June again. But Eli also died, and I was very confused by this. So I'm like, so what are we gonna do moving forward if there is a book 3? And I just felt like sort of the ending was underwhelming. I just felt like it was kind of like it was a finish, but I was so impressed by Vicious from page 1 to the end, and this one I did not feel that way. I feel like the ending kind of fell a little bit flat. I think it makes sense that Victor's going off to, you know, do his own thing. He didn't come back for Sydney, and so Sydney and, oh, what's that cinnamon roll dude who's the muscle of the operation? And the dog, they're gonna go off, and Victor will hopefully meet up with them eventually. I think that was bittersweet and it made sense, but I just really felt like Eli dying and also Marcella dying and also Detective Stahl dying all fell so flat. Like all of it was just so, and that's the end. And there was no fanfare, there was no fireworks, and I expected more. I'm not sure what I expected though. So I really hope that there is a continuation, because I want more out of that story. I don't want that to be the ending. I want something that really feels like you have to see how this plays out. So in my opinion, if you're gonna read Vicious, I would say stop at Vicious. I wouldn't say read Vengeful unless Victoria comes out with a 3rd book, in which case I may or may not change my opinion. Vicious is a 5-star read. This was a 4. It's a good book. It's just, it's not Vicious. It very much lives in the shadow of Vicious. It's not what I wanted. It didn't have that same impact with the exploration of theme, and Sydney was the shining star of it, but like, I don't really want Sydney to be the shining star of it. I love watching Victor and Eli, and sadly, like, seeing Eli's past was one of the best parts of it, only for it to just all fall so flat. Like, seeing the inner workings of his mind and how manipulative he was is so fascinating, only for him to just be gone. And I think like the answer with how we're gonna, you know, help Victor having to do with the same doctor who was testing on Eli makes sense. It's just, again, not like, wow, it's not like a big, like, amazing answer. Whereas I felt like beat for beat for beat, like every single step taken in Vicious was just like one good choice after another in writing to make like to really bring the most out of the story. And I felt like this was just, it was a good book that was fine, but it didn't have that same impact as Vicious did. So we'll see what happens in the next one, but that one was just a 4 for me. And maybe I might retroactively change it if Victorious comes out and it's actually like great. Then maybe that will like somehow bridge those gaps and be like, actually, this is awesome. So those are some things that I read recently. Let me know if you're excited for Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. If you have an arc and have started reading it, I would love to know your thoughts on this. Thank you so much for watching. Leave your comments and questions down below. If you made it this far, leave a witch, because there's a line in here that says Maria says that she's a witch, and then so does the widow she meets that is very compelling. So leave a witch or witch-ish emoji down below, even though it's lesbian vampires. We're doing witches. We're not going with the obvious answer. So leave that emoji down below, comments and questions if you want, and I will see you next time. Bye! And before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Andy Mason, Ashley H, Astra, Barry B, Call Me Kodiak, Choco's Homesick for Taiwan, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Eric D, Jade L, John E, K, Kaleno K, Katie Ann, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lady Chips, Lemon Jelly. Y'all put food in your name, and I'm always doing this at lunchtime and I always get hungry. Lex, Other Lex, Lily, Mataraptor, Megwin Rose, Melissa, Minby, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Peggy Lou, Rain, Reese, SJ, Scarlet, Samar, SMK, Spoopy, Steph B, 3 raccoons in a trench coat, Tori, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, and Zorvictia. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And last but not least, I also have to say a big thank you to my Potato Search Marxist patrons, and those are Adrian, Aaron, Alejandra, Alicia's Last Frayed Nerve, Althea, Amanda D, Angelica, Artie the Ninth, Ava, Bari the Witch, Beck, Blythe Lavender, Bookish by Jenna, Bookish Rabbit, Bree, Bridget G. Collins, Kate B, Caitlin, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate, Kathy, Celeste, Claire Online, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Courtney, Darius, Danielle, Danita, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Dilf Enthusiast, Silco Apologist Era. Good shit. Dorian, Dorothea supports public education. Hell yeah. Draco-chan, Drive-By Thinker, Ebby, Emily A, Emma, Aaron with 2 E's, Aaron Starlight, Fiona, Gadarn, Halia Artisan, Hannah C, Helen, Harising, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Kai Brecker has not read 6 of Crows, Caitlin, Catherine, Katie L, Katrina, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, KMTV, Kayana, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura is Angry, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Lindsay M, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Macy Jane, Maddie, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Mary, Megan, Malara, May, Morgan, Myth Lesbian, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Paige P, Paul, Penelope, Penny Shilling, Foxglove, Plague Carrier, Queen Cereal, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Rhea, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Sikoria, Saintbringer, Sakyalume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Sophie, Stardust, T Delegati, Talia, That Nerdy Mystic, That One Cute Chick, This Is Not a Trap, Tiana, Too Thick to Work Today. Oh my gosh, I forget how unhinged it gets at the end. Triple M, Tito Phoenix, Unicorn Jenny, Waves, Wobbs, Writer A, and last but not least, Zayden's award-winning Eggplant. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend.